Welcome to this explainer. Okay, today we are unraveling one of the most dramatic, fascinating, and just wildly cyclical histories in all of international sports. We are talking about the French national football team. Now, if you follow global football at all, you know that France is elite. They produce arguably the widest pool of consistently top-tier talent anywhere on the planet right now. But, contrary to popular belief, that hasn't always been the case. Their history is defined by these incredible, euphoric highs, followed by absolutely devastating, scandalous lows. It is, for sure, a true roller coaster dynasty. So let's dive right into this by posing our central question for today. How exactly did a team known for heartbreaking failures and decades of underachievement transform into this unstoppable modern talent factory? Like, how did they completely rewire their sporting culture to conquer the footballing world? Well, to understand the superpower of today, we actually have to wind the clock all the way back to the very beginning. Section 1, Birth of Les Bleus. Heading back to the early 20th century, football was actually still struggling to find its footing in France. It was often viewed as just a pastime for the elite. But despite that slow start domestically, they established their iconic identity really early on. Today, they're universally known as Les Bleus, the Blues. It's a direct nod to the blue shirts they wear, which are drawn straight from the French tricolor flag. They played their very first official international match way back on May 1st, 1904. It was a 3-3 draw against their neighbors, Belgium. So not a bad start, right? But on the pitch, they were still far from being a powerhouse. Yet, off the pitch, France was literally the ultimate architect of the global game. Think about this. In 1904, France literally helped found FIFA, with Frenchman Robert Guérin stepping up as its very first president. By 1930, at the inaugural World Cup, diminutive French forward Lucien Laurent actually made history by scoring the first ever World Cup goal. And in 1938, they hosted the entire tournament, hoping to win it all on home soil. But they ended up bowing out in the quarterfinals. So they were literally building the global structures of football, even if their own trophy cabinet was sitting there completely empty. Section 2. The First Golden Generation. Okay, so after World War II, things finally started to click for France, and it really all revolves around one untouchable number: 13. The late 1950s saw the arrival of France's first true crop of superstars, and it completely changed how the nation was viewed on the pitch. In the 1958 World Cup in Sweden, Moroccan-born French striker Just Fontaine was just an absolute menace. He scored 13 goals in that single tournament. Let that sink in. It is a World Cup record that still stands to this day, a truly untouchable achievement. Led by Fontaine and the brilliant playmaker Raymond Kopa, France stormed to a third-place finish. They had officially arrived on the world stage. But, and you'll see this is a huge theme in our explainer today, the boom is always followed by a bust. Riding incredibly high from 1958, France hosted the inaugural European Championship in 1960. In the semifinals against Yugoslavia, playing in front of this packed home crowd, France held a 4-2 lead with just 15 minutes left on the clock. And then just a complete, unbelievable collapse. They conceded 3 late goals, losing 5-4. It was a completely devastating blow that just abruptly ended this first golden era. And honestly, that collapse ushered in the true dark ages of French football. Throughout the 1960s and 70s, an entire generation of French fans grew up rarely even seeing their team on the biggest stages. They failed to qualify for the World Cups in 62, 70, and 74, and they had a genuinely embarrassing group stage exit in 66. It was literally decades of total frustration. Section 3. Platini's Magic Square. Then came the 1980s. A new group of players emerged to basically save French football. And they transformed the national team into one of the most beautiful footballing sides the world had ever seen. The absolutely crucial point here is this specific tactical setup, Le Carré Magique, or the Magic Square. This was a legendary midfield quartet made up of Michel Platini, Alain Giresse, Jean Tigana, and Luis Fernandez. They played this incredibly elegant, fluid, technically advanced style of offensive football. In fact, they were so fun to watch that people actually started calling them the Brazilians of Europe. Now, this era brought massive success, but it was paired with just agonizing heartbreak. They suffered 2 insanely dramatic, emotionally draining World Cup semifinal losses to West Germany in 1982 and 1986. That '82 match was actually decided by a brutal penalty shootout, But sandwiched right smack in the middle of those losses was pure, unadulterated glory. At Euro 1984, playing on home soil, Michel Platini scored a record 9 goals, completely carrying France to a 2-0 victory over Spain in the final. It was their very first major international trophy. Yet true to form, the roller coaster plummeted right back down. As those stars of the 80s retired, France entered this transition period that culminated in the absolute, unmitigated disaster of 1993. So they needed just a single point from their final 2 home qualifying matches to reach the 1994 World Cup. And they choked. They lost to Israel, and then, in the final do-or-die match against Bulgaria, they conceded a shocking 90th-minute goal, losing 2-1. France completely missed both the 1990 and 1994 World Cups. The whole nation was just absolutely stunned. Section 4. The 1998 World Champions. But here's the thing about that massive failure in the early 90s. It didn't just cause outrage. It actually sparked a systemic, nationwide footballing revolution. The French Football Federation knew they couldn't just rely on luck or golden generations anymore. They needed a factory. Enter the Clairefontaine Blueprint. Opened in 1988, this world-class National Football Institute was custom designed to catch elite youth talent during their most critical developmental years. They threw a massive net across the entire country, including immigrant communities and overseas territories, creating this highly trained, direct pipeline straight to the national team. And the result of that pipeline was just profound. By the late 1990s, manager Aimé Jacquet had built a squad that actually reflected the everyday reality of France, turning the national team into this powerful mirror for French society. They were affectionately dubbed Black Blanc Boer, Black, White, Arab. It was this remarkably diverse team representing African, Caribbean, Pacific Island, and European heritage. And they weren't just a collection of elite talent. They were a deeply, deeply united front. And all that unity culminated on July 12, 1998. Hosting the World Cup, France achieved the literal unthinkable. Led by the brilliant Zinedine Zidane, who scored 2 unbelievable headers, France absolutely dismantled the mighty Brazil 3-0 in the final. Millions of people flooded the Champs-Élysées. As defender Lilian Thuram so powerfully put it later, we were all France that day. It was this massive cultural and sporting triumph that basically catapulted France straight to superpower status. Section 5. The Modern Dynasty. Now, you might think winning the World Cup fixed everything permanently, right? No way. The roller coaster was about to reach its absolute wildest extremes yet in the 21st century. Just take the 2006 World Cup. It's this extreme paradox packed into a single tournament. On the high side, an aging Zinedine Zidane came out of retirement and just completely masterminded a phenomenal run to the final, playing honestly some of the best football of his entire life. On the low side, his dream farewell ended in a shocking red card after he infamously headbutted Italy's Marco Materazzi right in the chest. France lost the final on penalties, totally unable to recover from that one fateful moment. But listen, 2006 was just a gentle bump compared to the absolute institutional collapse of 2010 in South Africa. I mean, this is wild. Striker Nicolas Anelka gets sent home after a massive bust-up with the coach. In protest, the players literally go on strike and refuse to get off the bus to train. The manager is then forced to awkwardly read a player's statement to the press. Unsurprisingly, they suffered a disastrous winless group stage exit. It was rock bottom, just a total, absolute national embarrassment. They needed a fix. France needed someone to steady the ship, someone who knew exactly what winning and genuine unity looked like. So, in 2012, they brought in Didier Deschamps. This was the very captain who hoisted the trophy back in 1998. Deschamps came in with a strict mandate to rebuild the team's completely fractured culture. He leaned heavily into that elite Clairefontaine pipeline, which, by the way, was now churning out world-class stars faster than ever, and he forged a squad built on absolute discipline and togetherness. And under Deschamps, France transformed into a terrifyingly consistent modern dynasty. Look at this run. They reached the final of Euro 2016. Then, exactly 20 years after their first triumph, they won the 2018 World Cup in Russia, just blowing past Croatia 4-2. They secured the Nations League trophy in 2021, and they made it all the way back to back-to-back World Cup finals in 2022, only narrowly losing that epic, legendary match to Argentina on penalties. Which brings us to this final provocative thought. Today, France is spearheaded by young, absolute phenoms like Kylian Mbappé, and they're backed by this seemingly endless pipeline of elite talent. But looking at their history, this soaring, euphoric highs of 58, 84, and 98, which are literally always followed by the crushing lows of the 60s, 93, and 2010, we really have to ask, has the Mbappé generation permanently rewritten French history into a state of uninterrupted dominance? Or is this roller coaster just climbing the tracks right now, waiting for another dramatic plunge? Thanks for joining me on this explainer. I hope you walk away with a much richer understanding of this absolutely incredible footballing dynasty.